There are a lot of dead kids in FNAF, like a lot. In a story built on the horror of dead children possessing animatronics, the longer it goes on, the more of them you need to introduce. What's strange is that, from the broad view of the series' story as a whole, there's one grouping of these victims so mysterious that some argue they never even existed. The DCI, or Dead Children Incident, seen only one time for a brief moment in the second game. 5 victims who may or may not have even died. But before the DCI, there was the MCI. Back in the first FNAF game, we see a newspaper on the wall about 5 children who went missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The event is referenced endlessly throughout the franchise and is dubbed the Missing Children's Incident. The striking similarity in the number of victims, 5, and the lack of attention the DCI gets compared to the MCI has led many to think that these two events are one and the same. But there are reasons this idea doesn't work either. For that, we'll need to get into the nuts and bolts. Welcome to Rosie Spot Parlor. First, let's cover why the MCI is so important. It's the first mention of any concrete victims we get in the entire series, except the Bite of 87, I guess. Without learning about them in the first game, we wouldn't have had much proof that the animatronics were possessed at all. Maybe they do just get a bit quirky at night. But with the story of the MCI, we eventually get the victims' names, most of them, and come to associate each of them with their respective animatronic. In the separate continuity of the films, we even get a mirrored version of these 5 dead kids. They're an integral part of the story no matter how you slice it. Their deaths are the original sin the story opens with. Avenging them and freeing their restless spirits is a central plot throughout the 7 to 8 games in the series' first arc. And that's why it's a bit confusing when, in the second FNAF game, we're shown another, seemingly separate group of victims, again, 5, who were never named or mentioned ever again. Are we sure this isn't the MCI? What is it? What do we do with it? The single glimpse we get of the DCI is from one of the few minigames you have a chance of playing after dying in the main game of FNAF 2. Each of these minigames tell us something lore relevant, and one of the most striking is Save Them. Playing as Withered Freddy, you walk around the FNAF 2 location and find 5 dead bodies on the ground. Touching any of them ends the minigame. There's a 1 in 100 chance when entering a certain room that a mysterious purple guy will pop up and try to get you. A voice spells out the word "Save Them" during the minigame, and when it ends, you see the text, "You can't." What is this minigame telling us, and how do we know this isn't the MCI? Is it? Well, over the now decade plus of FNAF's ongoing existence as a series, we've gotten answers to a lot of questions as new information continues to fill in the blanks, but the mystery of the DCI is not one of those questions, only seeming more irrelevant and obscure as time draws on. So instead, to answer this question, we're going to use the reverse approach of turning our brains off to experience the story of FNAF 1 and 2 like it's 2014 and we don't know what the heck is going on. Sound good? Let's go. Starting with FNAF 1, the first game is pretty light on story. The phone guy doesn't tell us much that'll help, rather than mentioning the Bite of 87. Everything important we learn comes from newspapers, which have a small chance of appearing on the wall in one of the cameras. From these newspaper clippings, we learn that a man dressed in a mascot costume lured 5 children into the back room at Freddy's, after which they went missing, their bodies never found. The suspect is identified, captured, and convicted. Afterwards, parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots, with one parent likening them to reanimated corpses. Following the controversy, we're told that, at the time of writing, Freddy's was set to close at the end of the year. This is how we come to know the Missing Children's Incident, or MCI. We can put 2 and 2 together and presume that the children whose bodies were never found were most likely stuffed into the animatronics, causing their gross appearances, strange behavior, and uncanny haunted quality. Given that the newspapers are present in this location, the only location we know of at this point, we can also assume that the incident happened right here. This conclusion is borderline confirmed later in the series, but back on track. The only other thing to note from the first game for the sake of this video is the paycheck we get at the end of the game. We can use the wage we're paid to estimate that the game takes place in the early 90s. Cool. Moving to FNAF 2, the first thing we see is this newspaper clipping, the grand reopening of a vintage pizzeria given new life. We learn that the location from FNAF 1 was set to close, so this makes sense. In Night 1 of FNAF 2, Phone Guy welcomes you to the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's and tells you to forget anything you may have heard about the old location and that it's been left to rot for a while. The distinct layout and features of this building and the wording Phone Guy used tell us that we're in a separate building in a separate location from the first game. On Night 2, we're told that the older models, the classic animatronics we saw in the first game, have been brought from the previous location. He calls them ugly and mentions that they smell bad, almost like there are bodies stuffed inside. Everything is telling us that the events of FNAF 2, when the new location opens, happened well after the missing children's incident that originally got the old FNAF 1 location closed. Pretty straightforward. The FNAF 2 phone calls are unique in this series because they weren't recorded weeks, months, or years prior for us to eventually hear, but are instead each recorded the same day of the night we're on as we hear them, giving these phone calls a linear narrative progression which follows the gameplay. This is why it's interesting that, on Night 3, we're suddenly told about rumors and local stories about a tragedy happening relating to Freddy's, and not to give it too much thought. After all, as we're told, the Day Guard hasn't seen anything unusual. This is the first mention of the Day Guard, and the way he's mentioned next to these supposedly baseless rumors is pretty suspicious from a narrative standpoint. Don't worry guys, the Day Guard says nothing's wrong. Surely we can trust him, right? On Night 4, we're told that an investigation has opened at Freddy's and that the store may need to close down. We're also told that someone may have been tampering with the animatronics. I wonder who. On Night 5, we learn that the building is now on lockdown and that no one is allowed in or out, especially previous employees, and that a position on the day shift is now available. Turns out that Day Guard wasn't so trustworthy after all. Something tragic has happened at Freddy's, likely something the Day Guard did, and now the location's shut down pending further investigation. We're also told that the staff is going to try and get in contact with the original owner of the restaurant, who mysteriously they can't seem to get in contact with either. Isn't that weird? This line about trying to get in contact with the original owner has garnered a lot of confusion from theorists, and it does seem kind of random on first blush, but think about it again from a narrative perspective. The Day Guard, now a previous employee, is nowhere to be found, the restaurant even shuttering to make sure he doesn't get back in. And we're told that the original restaurant owner is also seemingly nowhere to be found. Could it be that he had something to do with this? That he may have even been the rogue Day Guard himself? This is another conclusion that's been given more support later in the series, but this line right here in FNAF 2 is already odd. Then, on Night 6, we get the real doozy. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it, now none of them are acting right, referring to the animatronics. Who do we know of that would use a mascot suit to do something they weren't supposed to do, which led to the animatronics acting off? It's happening again. Almost identically to the MCI, another disguised killer and another 5 victims. This is where the linear narrative of FNAF 2 ends, with the location closing down after just the 1 week it had been open, supposedly due to animatronic malfunctions. We also get a paycheck telling us that this game happens in 1987, before the events of the first game. This is kind of confusing, but all it really means for the sake of our video is that we weren't actually playing during the era of the MCI and FNAF 1, and we're instead there for a reopening of the same location at a later date, which is how FNAF 2 can both be after the MCI and before FNAF 1. Don't worry about it. Back on track. Unlike the phone calls in FNAF 2, the mini-games are doled out to the player randomly after dying throughout the nights, so there isn't a concrete way to order them or nail down a timeline, but we can glean a few things. Back to the Save Them minigame, looking at this map, it is unequivocally the FNAF 2 location. It matches the building's layout, distinctly different from FNAF 1's, and we even see the brand new toy animatronics on stage, meaning this had to have happened while the business was more or less open during the week we play through. The mysterious purple guy who shows up to get us is certainly the perpetrator, the Day Guard / previous restaurant owner, and these 5 victims are almost certainly the reason Freddy's goes into lockdown, the thing the yellow suit in the back was used for, and the reason why the animatronics are suddenly not acting right. So that's the DCI, a repeat offense from the killer we learned about in the first game. But that creates as many questions as it answers. Why? Wasn't the perpetrator from the first game locked up? And why do we never hear about these victims again? What's the point? Well, this is when my reasoning for backing up and going over the story events in this linear way should start to make sense. The point is simple: storytelling. Not some convoluted lore reason for why this had to happen the way it did, but a simple decision made by a writer for the sake of telling a story. From this perspective, the DCI starts to make a bit more sense. When we learn about the MCI in FNAF 1, it's a vague story told in snippets. The suspect is just described as a man who's been arrested and convicted. There's nothing to imply that he's still a threat, and in a vacuum, the first game isn't too concerned with him. It's mostly about the haunting of this pizzeria. The MCI is depicted as an isolated event. The public think it's been settled by the suspect's conviction, but it wasn't. The pain of these children live on, tortured and undiscovered in the mascot characters at the restaurant where they died. But it wasn't an isolated incident. This is the DCI, the story of FNAF 2. Just when the public thought it was over, the suspect arrested, the restaurant closed, and finally, the opening of a newer, safer location, he struck again. Emerging from the unassuming role of a security guard at the new restaurant, he reenacts the first crime, taking another 5 victims in what's now established as the killer's signature, his MO. Did the authorities get the wrong suspect? Did the killer get off on smaller charges due to lack of proof? It's an open-ended question, as the arrest and conviction from the newspapers in the first game are elaborated on about as much as the DCI, which is to say, not at all. But the message is clear. If we thought the killer was done for after the first game, we were wrong. The killing isn't over. Not only is the killer at large, he may have had more to do with the company behind Freddy Fazbear's Pizza than we realized. The circumstances of the first killing were never random. And here, in this minigame, we see the victims, we see the location, and we see the killer. It's happening again, here and now. You may want to save them, even the spirits within the animatronics may want to save them, but you can't. To say that the DCI never happened because it isn't important does a disservice to the story FNAF 2 is telling. It establishes our killer as this shadowy silhouette with a vested interest in the Freddy's franchise. The MCI wasn't a one-off and it wasn't random. The killer has an agenda. This also telegraphs the direction the series would head in next, with FNAF 3 focusing entirely on the killer as you face off with him one-on-one. The arc of that game is freeing the spirits of the MCI kids and attempting to put an end to the killer for good. But, of course, he always comes back. The reason the MCI is referenced again and again while the DCI isn't is because they have different narrative purpose. The MCI is about the victims. The DCI is about the killer. It's a message from the killer himself. He's back, and this isn't over. There was something special about the MCI kids. It seems very important that there were 5 and that they were each stuffed in their respective suits. I left out this detail earlier, but the MCI isn't first described in the papers as a single event, but multiple. The killer is seen luring 2 children into the back room before supposedly being identified and captured. Only afterward do the disappearances of 3 more kids get linked to this perpetrator. The crimes were committed one after the next, and victims chosen with a sense of purpose. They were carefully hidden and never found. This is why the spirits linger the way they do. The DCI has none of the same tact. It's a sloppy, heavy-handed echo of the original tragedy, a reminder of the children who were never found. In this way, the DCI victims are interchangeable, unimportant, and ultimately forgettable, as if the neglect the story shows these victims is reflected in the thoughtlessness with which they were killed. And this is why some people to this day think the DCI didn't even happen, that it's been retconned or misunderstood. But, like a sacrificial offering, there they sit, 5 bodies left out for the 5 bodies that were never found, the 5 victims who never were. I hope you liked my video. If you did, consider giving it a like or subscribing to my channel for more FNAF theory and analysis videos. I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers before the end of the year. Leave a comment with your theory of the DCI. Is it the MCI? Is it something else? Was it Lefty? If you have nothing intelligent to say, just put your favorite FNAF brain rot theory in the comments. I'll read them all 14 of them. I know that I didn't really talk about like real FNAF lore stuff in this video, like I wasn't getting into Agony or Remnant or the difference between hauntings and spirit possessions and what's going on with Charlie and FNAF 2. That's all better saved for a later time, but sometimes I just like doing these theories from the perspective of someone playing them back when they were released without all of this hindsight we have now. But let me know what you think. Bye bye.